Hi, welcome to today's live. I am going to be talking with Dr. Kelly Livingston, and we're going to be talking all about skin disease and how we treat skin disease naturopathically. That includes eczema, psoriasis, acne, hives, pretty much any type of skin illness is something that we definitely do a great job with in naturopathic medicine. And I know a lot about this because I actually became a naturopathic doctor because of really severe eczema that I had ever since I was a little kid. And it's something that I really treat quite often nowadays. A lot of my infants and the kids in my practice having a really big problem with eczema. And I think it's a really huge problem in today's world. And we'll talk all about why that's the case. Hi, Dr. Livingston. How's
Hi,
it
how are
going?
you?
Good. So as I was telling them, skin disease is really close to my heart because it is something that I dealt with, and it's actually the reason I became a naturopathic doctor. And I can really sit here today saying that I am totally eczema free. And I actually decided to wear a shirt like this today because I used to have eczema all over this area. And I think anybody who has eczema knows that these are some of the places that you have a lot of eczema. And I used to have it all over. I used to wear turtlenecks in the summer because I was so embarrassed and I would have to cover my skin. So I know what it's like to be there, to be so embarrassed when you are suffering from this, any type of skin illness. And, it's
Sure.
painful and people don't really understand what it's like unless you actually have a skin issue like that. And actually being totally and completely cured, I never get eczema anymore, is something that I want to share with others and how we go about doing that as naturopathic doctors. So
Yeah,
tell me in your practice, how much skin disease do you see and what types of skin diseases do you treat?
I I see quite a bit in my practice. And side note, before I answer that, I don't know if you remember our first year of med school. I actually had been breaking out with horrible acne. I had gone off of birth control that I had previously been on for a long time, and I was really working hard on balancing my hormones. And then for a few months' time, I was getting these strange outbreaks of hives on my face, and I had this horrible itchy skin, and it was oozing, and it was a terrible experience. And I know that our naturopathic tools are what helped me with that as well. So to answer your question about patients, because I went through that myself, I do feel like treating skin issues in my patients is something I really love to help them with. And eczema is a big one, psoriasis, acne, and then also, lots of skin issues in kids. Unfortunately, kids are toxic more nowadays than they ever were. And so I'm seeing that a lot more in my practice than I did when I first started years ago. Those are probably the biggest ones that I see. Because I did struggle with acne myself so much, I really love helping people figure out those triggers and those underlying causes with that particular skin issue, whether it's hormones or foods or whatnot.
Yeah, actually, let's start there. Somebody did have a question about acne. I ask people to ask questions. And so definitely, you guys, when we have these lives, put in your questions because we will address them. And someone asked about acne, especially during the PMS time. And I think it'd be great if you could talk about that since you have personal experience there. And then we both have a lot of experience probably treating that in our practice. But tell us about the root cause of acne and how it has to do with hormonal imbalance and how food isn't, part of that as well too.
Yeah, for sure. So throughout our cycle, we have two different phases of our female cycle, and we'll have a balance of estrogen and progesterone that are working together that create, us getting our periods, but they also can create these PMS type symptoms if they're crashing too quickly or if they're a little bit imbalanced and the ratios are off. So one of the first things I'll do with women is figure out, okay, what role is our hormones playing in acne? Is it food or is it a hormone balancing issue? So I'll usually run a hormone panel with those patients. Very often I can tell, and obviously they'll say it to me, well, it's happening right before my period, or, things are getting better right when I do start my period, the acne starts to improve. It'll tend to be in certain, parts of the face too when it's more hormonally based. So I can sometimes tell that way. And then I will also obviously look at the role that food's playing. And a lot of times around that part in our cycle, that's when we're then craving maybe some more sugars and chocolates and things like that. And we're adding things into the diet that are inflammatory in nature and that are also going to not help with that hormone balance. And then if I do find that it's our hormonal trigger, I'll often use herbs and botanical medicine to balance that, whether if I'm supporting progesterone with something like Vitex, or if I'm supporting estrogens with a phytoestrogen blend, and working on each individual's hormonal balance.
Great. Yeah. And I think it's important because I noticed that most conventional doctors don't always run hormones. And then if they do, they don't run it on the right time of their cycle, or, we have to read it, especially for women, during the right phase of the cycle or right time of the cycle. So I usually tell people to do a date about, if you have a 28-day cycle, to do a day 21. Yep. Draw either blood draw or however you're going to test your hormones, or 7 days after you ovulate. And for women, normally there are some signs that you're ovulating. So that would be the appropriate time. So if your conventional doc is going to check hormones and they're not asking you to do it at a specific time, then it's kind of hard for us to read it. So every time I see hormones, I'm like, okay, so what day was that? And that'll tell me a little bit more about the balance. Sure. And then so what we're normally seeing what I'm normally seeing is estrogen dominance. Is a big one. So there's too much estrogen compared to your progesterone levels. And that could be for a number of reasons. There are so many toxins that are estrogenic, and so they look like estrogen. And so they might stimulate that process. Also, estrogen gets detoxed as if it's a toxin. So all these toxins that are like Teflon and all these other plastic and all these toxins that can disrupt our endocrine receptors can cause problems with hormones as well too. So for me, toxicity is a huge one that I always look at. And I'm always asking people to clean up everything. So like everything that's potentially toxic, stop using plastic, stop using Teflon pans, just so many, stop getting, meats with hormones and things like that. That'll all affect your hormones.
Yeah, the hormones in food is a big one that I've seen more and more throughout the years too. And then the fact that oftentimes women will come into us and they've been put on a hormone to treat acne, right? Like they've been put on birth control. And that's kind of counterproductive to the estrogen dominant theory that you're talking about.
Right. And some people might notice that their acne gets a little bit better. Some people notice it gets worse. Mm-hmm. And that's because you're now getting synthetic hormone and your body will stop production of its own hormones. Or if your liver and your gallbladder are truly congested, the synthetic hormone is going to cause more problems. So, you telling us what happens after you take birth control pill can tell us, what's going on. So if it gets better or worse, because it will get better in some cases, which is why people keep taking the birth control pill sometimes, because their acne gets better. And then food wise, what do you see with foods as a big problem for acne?
Sugar and dairy are the two biggest.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, absolutely. I think dairy is a big one, and then sugar. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think you're right. When we treat,
sometimes that's really all that you need to change. Yeah. In some teenage acne, I find that taking those two things out pretty immediately clears things up too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you're totally right. And so that's usually what I start with patients is like, just take out dairy and sugar and then let's go from there. And typically that next period is better. Sometimes you have to wait 1 or 2 or 3 cycles before you see a really big change. So don't get discouraged if you take out the dairy or the sugar and then you don't see any changes really quickly with the acne, because it takes a couple months for our hormones to shift. And also for those toxins to get out of our system and for the antibodies to those foods to come down. And the body actually just needs to shift when you make a change in your diet. So yeah, absolutely. And then there are herbs and other things that we can use. Do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, I'll often use herbs kind of topically in that situation. Sometimes I'll have people make a tea of astringent herbs like yarrow or witch hazel and use that to apply topically. And then I very often will use just a very simple pure aloe product for acne, because you really don't want to be clogging the pores more. You don't want to be triggering any sort of topical irritation or reaction. So usually some astringent herbs, whether again a handmade tea or something like a witch hazel and then an aloe. I pretty much keep it really simple when it comes to that topically. And then I'll often support, as you said, the liver is processing hormones. And a lot of times acne is our body's expression of the fact that our liver is not functioning properly, and we need to support that. So I'll do that herbally very often with things like milk thistle and artichoke, things like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
And being Keegan, hi, welcome back. Extreme fatigue right before the cycle is, it's the same stuff. It's basically related to the hormones being imbalanced. And so oftentimes you'll see a combination of acne, fatigue, moodiness, headaches. Sometimes people get headaches. Sometimes people get cramping, breast tenderness, and all of this kind of comes together as usually about 7 to 10 days before your cycle is going to come. And that's when the hormones are shifting because you haven't gotten pregnant and now, and now your body's getting ready to have a period. And those hormones need to metabolize out of the body. And for one thing, if the liver is really congested, they're not going to metabolize very well. So something that we do use is, a couple of things to really help with metabolizing those hormones. As you said, milk thistle. We also use something called DIM, and there's a bunch of other things that we can use depending on what's going on with you. Optimizing the liver gallbladder function is one of the things I really like to focus on. And I would say dairy and sugar are probably up on that list too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So on that note, I personally, in my practice, me having really severe eczema, what I like to say, and I mention it every time, is the detox funnel. And if we clear it out, then your skin is actually the largest organ that is actually going to be like a supplemental filter. So if your kidneys aren't working and your gut's not working and you're constipated and maybe you have kidney stones and maybe your liver's not working and you're not creating enough bile, et cetera, the toxins are not going to go out the correct exit. So instead of going out those exits, they're actually going to come out through the skin. And that's your largest organ that basically is a supplemental filter. So if the kidneys aren't working, the gut's not working, that's where those toxins are going to try to release out of. So I remember when I had eczema, one of my issues was that my mom had like all of her teeth had amalgams, which are basically 50% made of mercury. And she basically had it like in all of her teeth. And so when I was born, or when I was in her womb, I got a lot of that mercury into my system. So I remember when I was a kid and I would scratch and it would smell like metal. And those metals were basically trying to leak out of my skin. Yeah. And I would scratch and it was so gross. I'm like, why do I smell like metal, like a rusty bike or something like that? And so that's one of the things I always remember, that because it's just kind of showing you that if it can't go out the right way, then it's going to go out your skin. And so I think all skin illnesses have to do with that. And it just depends on how your body's going to express that, and also your genetics. And I mean, a couple of things come into play, right? So for me, it definitely leaks out through my skin. And that's one of the places it'll go as soon as my detox funnel is full. So for me, it was really a combination of what's filling my funnel. So there was the mercury that came from my mom. There was the food I was eating, which was just, I grew up on junk food basically. And then other toxins that I was putting into my system. And, I was using Teflon pans. And I mean, there's just so much. So with naturopathic medicine, we kind of uncover what are all the things that are filling your funnel. Mm-hmm. And we just go, vaccines is another one, definitely. And my mom didn't really know. So she stopped breastfeeding me and started feeding me like formula. And because her doctor said, oh, your daughter might be allergic to your breast milk, which is a little ridiculous. But I mean, it might have been probably was.
Could have been something she was eating.
She was eating, but also her mercury was probably leaking into me from her breast milk. So in some ways, maybe I was having reactions to her breast milk, but in other ways, breast milk has so many other great things like antibodies and, that, and good fat. And also probably the formula was not helping me out because of the dairy component of that. And it was probably like really gross corn syrup filled formula, not like the great organic ones that we have nowadays that you could use it as supplements. But so my eczema just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And so it really wasn't until I became a naturopathic doctor. And then eventually when I got out and did more research, I discovered something called the liver gallbladder flush, which I don't know if you do any of in your practice, Dr. Livingston, but it's like my favorite thing.
You actually turned me on to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's my favorite thing ever. So it literally is doing a really deep detox. And usually I get people to the point where it's then safe for them to do this really deep detox. And then we literally flush out the liver gallbladder. And so I give things to promote more bile creation and then to basically squeeze that bile out. And oftentimes the bile is going to get, it's going to get bound to toxins, and those are going to come out as well too. And then a lot of times, like I actually had kidney stones. They never moved, but I actually, during the whole process of cleaning out my system, my kidneys would get super achy. And I would have to urinate like all the time. And then once I cleaned everything out, I don't have to do that anymore. Like I don't feel like I have to urinate all the time. And I don't ever have that achiness in my kidneys. But I remember when I was going through that process and my eczema was really bad, my kidneys were always sore and achy. And I would just like, what is this back pain? And I would have all this like pain up here, and all of that pain's gone. So when we clean out and then your skin heals, you know that inside things are really healing too. So that's really what I found. And so with any skin illness, that's kind of what I look at: what's filling it, what's making that funnel smaller, like stress and genetics. And then are your kidneys working well? Is your gut working well? And then let's flush it out. So that's the process that I usually go through. How about you, Dr. Livingston, when you see like eczema, psoriasis, how about you?
Yeah, so also going to obviously focus on those emunctories, those organs of elimination, and opening up what you call the detox funnel for sure. I also do look at a lot of gut health and dysbiosis, which we've done in IG Live on before. People are always surprised, I'll often get people coming in with candida overgrowth that's, on their skin. And they're always shocked when I explain, well, that's actually coming from a systemic overgrowth, and that's something that we can look at in the gut, and that will often come out in the skin. So I do focus a lot on the gut microbiome and dysbiosis, and also keeping in mind that there actually is bacteria that lives on our skin that needs to be in balance as well. And so if it is maybe more of a fungal overgrowth, I might use something topical like coconut oil, but that is really antimicrobial, antifungal. So you need to make sure that you're balancing out that internal gut flora so that the skin has the opportunity to repopulate that as well.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the exits. So
Yeah.
I didn't really focus so much on that, but that's your gut, and that's one of the exits. So I always look at that as well too. And I think you're totally right. So your gut is basically like skin inside your body. And so what it looks like internally is also what it will look like externally if the gut mucosa is all leaky and all that. So your skin's going to also have the same issue as well. So yeah, definitely. And then I think one thing that's overlooked is kidney health. And what I notice is that anytime I have anyone with any skin problems, acne, eczema, psoriasis, any of these skin issues, I see that the EGFR, the filtration of the kidneys, is a little bit lower. And so like if it's below 90, I start looking at it. And normally our reference ranges start at 60. So like if it's below 60, then your conventional doc will say, okay, now we need to take a look at your kidneys. But for me, if it's below 90, I'm going to start to look at that and say, okay, so what's going on here? And I'll ask you questions about your kidney health, and I'll run a urine analysis probably and just check in with what's going on there. And I find a lot of like early formation of kidney stones, and that people are actually having some kidney issues, but they don't know about it. And I feel that was me. I didn't know that that's what I was dealing with, that I was dealing with kidney issues, but I was, and that's one of the exits that wasn't working well.
And a lot of times I find that kind of the basic early starts of kidney function issues is just being dehydrated.
Yeah.
So patients to drink
I was super bad at drinking water.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so drinking at least half your weight in ounces daily, if not more, especially if you're sweating, especially if you work out a lot. Definitely want to drink a lot of water there. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was definitely guilty of that. I would go through like the whole day without remembering to drink water. And I think that was part of the issue too.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the sweating is so important too. So whether it's, through exercise and stimulating your sweat gland that way, or if you're doing some sort of sauna practice, but making sure that you're sweating is so important for skin health.
Yeah. So when I had really bad eczema, I would love going to hot yoga. The first couple of times I would go, it would be horrible because my eczema would flare and it was just really bad. But so I would go, let's say if I went 7 days straight, the first 3 days my eczema would flare. And then on day 4, actually my eczema started to come down because I was helping those toxins to come out. And then by day 7, my eczema would be like gone. But then if I didn't do hot yoga for like another 4 weeks, my eczema would actually come back because my funnel was still clogged. Yeah. So eventually when I cleaned my funnel, then I don't have the problem of it needing to come out through my skin. But when I did have that problem, hot yoga was awesome. So if any of you guys have skin issues, I think sweating, infrared sauna, I think hot yoga is really great because not only are you sweating, but you're moving your lymphatic system too, which is where a lot of these problems kind of congest is in your lymphatic system. So a lot of times my eczema was like where a lot of my lymph nodes were and on my chest, where as a woman, a lot of our lymphatic system is there because as we breastfeed, we have a lot of lymphatic system here. And so I would get eczema like on all these areas like my joints and my flexors where I have a lot of lymph nodes. And that's because I was basically trying to scratch my lymph and try to move it to get these toxins out. So lymphatic drainage is another great one. Dry brushing is awesome. If you don't have like open wounds, you can dry brush. Just buy a dry brush from Amazon and you just brush towards your heart. And then I used to love lymphatic drainage massage. That was so awesome because you would just feel like it would hit right where it was so itchy, and then it would move that, and then it wouldn't be itchy anymore because the toxins have been released from that area. So yeah, someone was asking about nut allergies and how we associate nut allergies with kids and also with skin illness and things like that.
Yeah, I really, any food that you have an allergy to can cause, skin issues. I typically see the gluten and the dairy more common than the nuts as causing the skin problems, but for sure I've seen nuts as a trigger in some kids. Sesame seed is also another one, not a nut, but that's one that I'll see often in kids that have a sensitivity to that it can manifest in skin issues.
Yeah. And then I think nut allergies are becoming a problem. Well, I think there's a number of reasons. So like, for example, peanuts have aflatoxins on them, and that can be a really big problem. But I think it's because our kids' detox funnels are so full as it is that we're coming out. Like, so I think we as adults are toxic, and then we're carrying children, our toxins are going to our children, and then they're coming out and they're more toxic, and then they're being exposed to toxins from day one sometimes, and then our world is just toxic nowadays. So I think that's why kids are having so much eczema. I think that's why it's the number one problem I see in my infants, 2 months in, 4 months in, that they're having pretty severe eczema, where the faces of these children are so red. And I actually just posted a picture of one, and I've had more severe cases since then. And I'm actually requesting if I can use those pictures just because some of them are just so severe, and I want people to see it and know that the reasons behind why this is happening, and that we just need to clean everything up. And as a household, if you have children, you need to start cleaning up everything from the pots and pans you use to your plastic and your soap and everything, right?
And a lot of times in those young kids, I'm finding that it is a lot of leaky gut going on also. That's, again, part of the whole toxic burden and load, but I'm finding that their compromised GI tract is what's triggering a lot of those skin issues, which will make, allergies and sensitivities more likely as well.
Yeah. And then the formulas, and why do they have leaking? We talked about this last time, right? So if there's C-section or the antibiotics that you mentioned last time because of strep, or if they're being fed formula instead of mother's breast milk, all of those reasons can cause leaky gut really early on. I think that it's really frustrating when when mom is doing everything she possibly can, though. She's like super naturopathic. And
Yeah.
I do still see eczema in these babies too. And it's mild. It's not as bad as the mothers I see who kind of don't know about all this stuff. But if I know it can be really frustrating if you're a mom who is like doing everything you possibly can and your baby's still having eczema. And I think sometimes that case is like our world is just toxic and your baby's immune system and body is trying to figure that out. So I don't think we always have to look at symptoms as like a bad thing either. Like I think your immune system's also trying to figure it out. And if your baby system can't get it out the right way, then your baby system is trying to get it out, through the skin. And kind of working with that and knowing that that's a sign that there's something going on. And there might be exposure in the home. So one of my last patients who like super healthy, had a home birth, no vaccinations, no anything, and still the baby is having a little eczema. And what we found was there was mold in their home. So, so we were like, I'm like, what is going on? I mean, you are doing everything correct. And then it ended up being mold. And so it might be something in the environment and all that.
And I find that and I'm sure you do this too, but homeopathy is a great option in those cases where you're still working on figuring out what the underlying cause is. And a lot of times you can get some symptom relief for the kids with picking the right remedy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Homeopathy was really key in my healing. And I actually did an NDNR article about, about homeopathy. And I used serenum and sulfur, which are some of our main homeopathic remedies for clearing this serenum miasm, which is one that, like, if you see in your family line that there's a lot of eczema or asthma or any of those things, these remedies are really great. And they were not serenum, but sulfur was really instrumental in my healing. But if that like environmental exposure isn't taken out, what you might see is like the patient gets better and then worse, and then gets better and worse and better and worse. And you do have to try to figure out if there is an exposure. So someone was asking, plant-based diet, mom's on a plant-based diet, breastfed, and the baby's still having eczema. So I would look at the environment. I would also look at mom's toxicity. So like in my story, my mom had amalgams and the mercury was leaking into me through her breast milk and when I was in her womb as well too. So, I would look into that, your own mom, your own profile and what's going on with you. But I still wouldn't suggest not breastfeeding. So that would be something you would want to work with Dr. Livingston, I, or another naturopath on what would be the best way to detox you while you can still breastfeed. And sometimes I have mothers take like just a day off, so we can just like do a day or 2 days off and just pump and dump during that time and just kind of prep milk during that time. So those are some things that we might look at if there's an infant with eczema.
Yeah.
And then let's see, what else did people ask? So psoriasis, rosacea, those were some other, keratosis pilaris. These are some other diagnoses that people had mentioned. Anything different that you do in these cases? Or is it a lot of just the same stuff?
It's some of it, is the same with psoriasis and the keratosis pilaris in particular. I find that gluten is a bigger trigger than dairy. I don't know if you've had that experience too, but typically, if I had to take out one food in those situations, it's a little bit different than it is for the eczema. But also still looking at that detoxification and that gut health. With psoriasis, we're also going to consider autoimmune processes. So we're going to rule those out and see if it's more of an autoimmune type of psoriasis. But with the KP, I find that there's usually a food trigger.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think psoriasis is usually a little harder to treat than eczema in my practice, just because there often is an autoimmune component that's already been triggered. I think eczema could be the precursor to that. But then when psoriasis is there, usually like there's a lot of leaky gut. There could be candida and fungus. I usually fungal overgrowth. I usually find, or even parasites in a psoriasis case. A lot of toxicity. So I had one patient who had like tattoos everywhere, and what we found was that the mercury levels were like through the roof, sky high, and actually everywhere that there was a tattoo, there was psoriasis patches.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I think
My
in that
tattoos get raised if my detox funnel's full and maybe I haven't been practicing as much self-care as I should. The tattoos that I do have will turn into hives and they'll get
yeah,
very raised, and I've always
yeah,
found that so
kind of
fascinating.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. And what I find is that there's probably like a threshold for how many tattoos you have on your body where the body can't handle that anymore. So this patient was covered with tattoos, and then had psoriasis on all those places. But then like where there was no tattoo, there was no psoriasis. So it was kind of interesting.
That is really
So I think there's different reasons for every person, but for me, it always boils down to some kind of toxin, allergen, something that's kind of um, assaulting the system, and then we not only have to identify it, but then we have to heal it as well too. But Vegan Keegan's asking, and I think Dr. Livingston, you'd be the best person to answer this. Are there safer tattoo inks? She's asking.
Yeah. So every time I've gotten one, it's just been the conventional way. But I do know that there are some places that use exclusively organic ink. I don't know where brand. There's actually a place in my hometown that does use organic ink, so I know it's an option. And then I always was really important for me to use natural care products, and then also immune system support when I was going to get a tattoo. To help the skin to heal and to build the immune system and to make sure that we're processing those toxins, when we do something like that.
Yeah. I find too that I find more problems in people who have colored ink than just the straight, ink that's the normal tattoo ink. So I don't know if there's
more. It's less healthy than just the black ink.
Yeah. So I think if you're going to get a tattoo, that might be a good idea. And then we use if you work with a naturopath and you're going to get a tattoo, I actually suggest you tell your naturopath, because there's homeopathic remedies and there's ways to heal the tattoo really quickly. And I would say detoxing or taking immune support and liver support when you're getting a tattoo is really important. And I think the bigger the tattoo, I think what I've just noticed is I see more health problems in my patients, or like the more part of your body is covered. So if you just have like 1 or 2 or even 3 tattoos, that's not covering a large part of your body. I don't see that as a big of a problem as someone who has it like covering their whole back or whole arm. But that also doesn't mean it has to be a problem, but I just see it more so.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, cool. So that's pretty much everything. I think I would say rosacea, the same stuff. I think rosacea, I see a hormonal imbalance as well too. So I would definitely look at hormones. And I think anybody who has skin issues, like it's always individualized towards you. So although we might see that there are really similarities across the board, I would say there's not one eczema case that's been the same. There's not one psoriasis case that's been the same. And I tell my story, which I think gives a good basis, but everyone's going to have different stuff. So everyone has different stuff filling their funnel. Everyone has different genetics, different stress profiles, different kidneys, different gut. So everything is different. So we always have to individualize it towards you. So we're always trying to get at the root cause. So I think in these lives, I think we mention a lot of the same things over and over. And that's because a lot of times gut and liver, gallbladder, and these are like all the root causes of pretty much every problem. But I think it's really interesting in the skin case, where I think skin is one of the first signs that there's a problem. So like, that's why you see with our infants, skin is like the first symptom, and constipation. You'll see like the kid is constipated, the kid has a skin issue before anything else happens. And that's really just like the first alarm system, because the kidneys and the gut's not working well. So now those toxins are trying to come out the skin. If we don't fix that problem, so oftentimes your pediatrician will say, oh, don't worry, your baby will grow out of the eczema. Don't worry about that. But yeah, so instead of it now coming out the skin, your baby might then start having IBS problems. And then your kid might start having ADHD and allergies and nut allergies. and it just keeps going and going and going. And if we look at our adult patients, so I'll ask like an adult patient, let's say 40-year-old woman, and I go, okay, tell me your whole entire story. She'll say, okay, so when I was a kid, I had eczema. And then after that, I had IBS. And then I got really severe migraines. And then I got this, and then I got that, and I got that. And then now I'm seeing her for Hashimoto's, let's say.
Right.
Okay. So if we don't fix the problem early on, then it's going to become more and more problems. You're not treating the root cause by putting steroid cream on your skin or, whatever, clindamycin or whatnot on your acne. You're not treating the root cause, and that is going to turn into something else later on. So I think this live is really important because if you have any skin issues, then treat it now. Let's get to the root cause now before it turns into anything else that's really severe.
Yeah, and it's really frustrating to me how many patients just come in being given topical steroids just like it's nothing and told, oh, you can take those forever. My mom actually had this crazy experience where she had some eczema. She didn't really listen to what I told her to do. She went on some topical steroids, and then when she came off, she struggled with recovering from that. She had chronically itchy, like super bad rash all over her legs for over a year.
Your mom is on our live.
Good job, Mom. But eventually figuring out what the triggers were for her, address the underlying cause. She doesn't need the steroid cream anymore. Her skin recovered. But, a lot of times patients come in and they're told, oh, you can just use this, and, oh, just put a little bit on your kids', cheeks, and don't worry about it.
And not to mention the hormonal problems that can arise from that, because it is steroid. And your steroid hormones are your sex hormones like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, cortisol, and how much it can mess those up. And especially in a growing child, how important that is to stay away from those if you can, and getting to the root cause of that. And you're really just dampening a problem that is going to grow into something else later on. And not only that, that medication is leading to further problems as well too. So, and then we have these kids who have been on steroid creams for so long. So first of all, it thins your skin. And so like even my skin, I don't know if he's like, it's pretty thin here because I used to have eczema all over here. And you can kind of see through my skin there just because of the steroid creams I used to use when I was a kid. But also the withdrawal that people have. So when they want to come off, and then they actually can't because now your body's so used to being on these steroids, and you need time to withdraw off of those. So just like if you're drinking coffee and you came off of it, it's the same thing, but your skin is now used to that. So if you can help it, try not to do steroids right from the get-go, especially if it's a child. And get to a naturopathic doctor and try to get to the root cause, because as I'm standing here like totally eczema free, like it's totally possible. And I think people just think like, okay, what was really frustrating for me was people, like the doctors were just telling me there's nothing to do. There's no diet changes you need to make. There's nothing you need to do. Just take this cream and probably it'll go away eventually. And it never did. I was like 30 years old and still had eczema issues. So, definitely we have answers there. So is there anything else that you want to share about skin disease, any pearls of wisdom that you want to tell anyone before?
I think one thing that we forget is that, we all want to protect ourselves from the sun and, wear natural sunscreens and be aware of that all. But also we need to remember that, we make our vitamin D by exposing our skin to the sun. So it still is important to get outside and get your skin exposed unprotected, at least once, ideally twice a day for about 15 minutes. So even though you do want to be careful about, sun cancer prevention and all that, I think it's still important to make sure you are getting outside and getting that skin that's, exposed to the sun.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with you. I always ask my patients at least 15 minutes, no sunglasses, no sunblock. And then after, if you want to put sunblock, that's okay. But at least 15 minutes and exposure, face, arms, and legs. So I think if you're like totally bundled up, you're not going to be getting enough sun exposure. And it might be hard depending, you know, if it's the winter, which is why during the summer, you want to spend as much time outside as you can, soaking in that sun, making that vitamin D, because it's fat soluble and it will stick around during the winter. So that's kind of what we're designed to do. But then I think most of us don't hang out outside in the summer when the sun is really optimal. So, you know, if not, then you probably need to take some vitamin D. But more optimally, there's so many things that happen when you go out in the sun, not just vitamin D production, but also your eyes. Don't wear sunglasses if you can for at least 15 minutes, because your hormones get stimulated from the sun hitting your retina. And so that's really important too, because cortisone is made from cortisol, and cortisol is one of the steroid hormones that gets stimulated with your circadian rhythm. And so if you don't have enough of that in your body, then you're also not going to have that anti-inflammatory effect, which we get from putting cortisone cream on ourselves. So your hormones being imbalanced can also cause a problem with the skin as well too, because there is an anti-inflammatory effect that you get when those hormones are being stimulated properly. So if you're super stressed out, that's when people also know that they have more eczema, more psoriasis, as when they're stressed out. So stress plays a really huge role as well too, because of that cortisol. And someone was saying scalp dermatitis. I think that was the question. So, you know, I would say it's not any different from anything else we've been talking about. When I had really severe eczema, I also had like really severe like scalp dermatitis and dandruff and all of that. And so it's the same stuff that went to the root the problem. So yeah. Anything else, Dr. Livingston, that you want to share about skin disease that we haven't covered?
I don't think so, not off the top of my head. I think that was really fun to talk about though.
Yeah. And I think just ending with stress, and I find that stress is a big part, and I don't think we stress it enough. I think if you're super stressed out, I think most people know who have eczema, psoriasis, acne, whatever, the more stressed out you are, the worse your symptoms are going to be. And that's one of the reasons, is because of your steroid hormones and how imbalanced they're going to get when you're stressed out. And so pregnenolone steal is where your body steals all the hormones and uses it to make stress hormone instead of all your sex hormones. And so that's one way that you might affect your skin issues if you have them. So de-stressing, I think we always deal with trauma in both of our practices. So if there's any traumas that trigger your stress to be increased, I always deal with that. So does Dr. Livingston. I know that because when we used to work in clinic, we used to do that together all the time. And so, you know, I think when working with a naturopathic doctor, we really assess every single thing that could be affecting. And I think we do these lives every week, I think we almost sound like a broken record because we say really similar things. But I think that is really the root cause always boils down to those things, stress and the gut and the liver, gallbladder, etc. But I think every like skin, there's some specific things we do that are different. And so that's why I think these lives are really great. So yeah. So Dr. Livingston, where can we find you again? So you're in...
So my practice is in Norwalk, Connecticut, and you can find me at rootsdeepmedicine.com or find me here on Instagram.
Great. Awesome. And then you also are going to start practicing in California too, right? Awesome. So anyone who's in California, she's going to be in San Diego. Is that right? Okay. So in San Diego, so anyone who's out there, definitely start reaching out to her now, because you can probably start treating virtually and then in person as needed. So I think that will be really great. Actually today, one of my patients who had hives is actually going to do a giveaway on her Instagram. So my program that I created, basically based off of a lot of the work I did with myself and then a lot of work I've done with my patients, I've created a program called Truly Transform. And it's actually supposed to be adjunctive to working with me as your naturopathic doctor. But for this giveaway, we're actually giving away all of the information for free. And the value is about $500. And so if you check out my Instagram today, I'll probably repost her post. And that giveaway is going on until Wednesday, I believe. I think she's going to announce it either tomorrow or Wednesday. And so if you guys are interested in learning about how I healed myself and all that, this program is being given away. So check out my Instagram. Also, if you want to check out my free masterclass, I talk about my story and the whole protocol that I did to clean up my my detox funnel and clear my skin. The link is in my bio, and I'm doing a masterclass today, Wednesday, and next Monday. So you guys can check that out too. Okay. And if you guys have any other topics you want us to cover, please let us know. DM one of us and let us know. We are loving these. These are super fun. So we'll find another topic to talk about next week, and we'll be here same time. All right. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Dr. Livingston.